As I was saying, welcome to the press conference of the film Suro. Let me introduce the people that are with us today in the press conference. From my left to right, Tony Folguera, producer; Laura Rubiola Sala, producer; POL LÓPEZ, actor; MIKEL GURREA, director; VICKY LUENGO, actress; and ILYASS actor; and XABIER BERZOSA, producer. I'm going to ask them a first question, and then please raise your hand so that you can take your turn asking question. Mikel, this is a question for Mikel, but also for XABIER. How did the idea emerge for this film, and at what time did you start to work upon this? It's a question for the producers and XABIER, Tono, Laura. When does the idea of this project emerge, and when did you start to collaborate together? Thank you to all of you, Kaixo Mayalen, for being here. The idea of Suro emerged in, 2010. I went to Barcelona to study the career. When I finished the career, my studies, in summer, I wasn't too sure what I was going to do, and my current partner, the family of my current partner, proposed that I work in the cork harvesting season, and I saw there was a world of textures and sounds that I thought was very attractive, and I had very conflicting emotion, where we came from. I was the owner, but I wasn't the landowner. I spoke Catalan, but I'm not Catalan. And I was working as a seasonal worker, but I was going to leave and they were going to continue to work there. So therefore, those conflicting ideas and that universe was quite cinematographic. And I believed that I was going to put this on a film. And then I had the opportunity of going to Ikusmira. I was 33, Berria, and I was 32 years old that time, and I was a long time with my partner. And a series of questions came along: where we want to live in the city, where we live in more in touch with nature, and we can live in a much fairer way or more sustainable way. We want to have children, yes or no? And that's where Suro stems from, that magma. There's simultaneous translation. Hi, Fran. I've understood about 5% of what Mikel says, about 5%, because I know him quite well. So more or less. In any case, the project comes to us, Malmo, through Ikusmira Berriak. We met Mikel and we love the project for everything he just said, but this is our first film, so all of a sudden it's quite clear we need other producers to accompany us that have got more experience. So we go to ILYASS Media, who all of a sudden, through the script, jumps on board, and then of course Irusoin, who has a trajectory which is quite spectacular as a producer. So they were the next production company to jump on board, and that's how everything emerged and started up. Hi, congratulations to everyone. It's been a marvelous, I love the film, it was marvelous. The question is for Vicky. So once again, your marvelous portrayal. How did you prepare this complex role? And above all, that's final scene of the party. I'm not too sure what happened. How did you work on that? Thank you. Gracias. Thanks for your kind words. Good morning, everyone. I believe that this role is the role in my life that I've less prepared outwards. That is to say, I've always seek or look for references, things that inspire me. I'm looking for images or external things that can take me to the place where to construct the character. But in this case, since I read the script which fascinated me. I think one of the most beautiful script and more complex scripts I've ever read. It's clear that it's a character that I had to confront from my fears and my own sincerity, because I think it's a film that talks about sincerity, of who you are, of how you show yourself, how people see you, how you judge and how you are judged, and also the fear of not being loved, and to try to maintain that honesty. So therefore I thought that the best way of confronting that issue was to seek within me my doubts, my fear, my truth, and my dangers. And as regards to the final sequence, that's the happiest time in front of a camera. Undoubtedly, I had a great time. We shot it in a special way. They said nobody knew what I was going to do. MIKEL didn't know, Paul didn't know, the DOP didn't know, and I asked MIKEL, who, by the way, I want to say publicly, I want to thank you enormously for allowing me to be here. I could almost cry because I'm very moved and emotional. And so... And I said, what do you want me to do here? What do we do here? And he said, do you want to rehearse it? And I said, no. I said, if you tell me no, well, I asked him, I said, but set a limit, because I could even take a piss in front of the camera. And he said, one of the notes and the most interesting limits that shows who the director and how smart he is, he said, only thing I tell you is I don't want you to provoke Ivan with another man. We're not interested in that, and this sequence isn't about this. So therefore it marked a very clear limit vis-a-vis what type of provocation and what vomit we had. It only had to. ILYASS helped me very much to learn Arab, and then I did so, and then I didn't remember what I did. So what you saw, I've only seen it once, and when I see it, I'll do that again. But I was very happy, and it's the moment where I felt as free I've ever felt, never felt this free. And the edited take is the first take and a bit of the second take. She did that in the first take, and we were all, and I remember being aware of the fact, I've got to continue to shoot this film. There were a lot of hours still. I remind you that we have on Channel 2 in Spanish, if there are any questions in Basque. Congratulations, MIKEL, for the film, and also to the actors and actresses for the portrayal. I want to congratulate you, and I also wish the best to the producers of the film. As regards the script, you've talked about cork and the tree, which is so cinematographic, and its image, that is to say, peeling the tree, that poetic image. And when you wrote the script, you've taken away the layers, or peeled away the layers of the protagonists as well. Is one peeling the tree and peeling the cork tree, and also the peeling the layers of the characters? Is that linked? Thank you very much for the question. Yes, that image when they peel the cork tree, the beauty and the violence of that act in itself, to a certain extent, it reflects the tension that exists between the characters in the film, perhaps in a metaphorical sense, an open sense, and perhaps not with such a direct significance as you've mentioned, but it did condense the film. We always constructed this film related to the relationship to these people from a tension point of view, the tension that exists between the skin and the interior of the characters. And that's what we did. Yes, it is related. When you write a script of this nature, you're not aware of all the details and that whether that exists. But then Catalan, it's very good. It's Suro. Not only does it mean cork, it also means to float. So that idea did float in the script. And our co-scriptwriter, a big round of applause for the Enrique, who co-wrote the screenplay with me. Congratulations to everyone for the film. A question for the actors and also for MIKEL. The actors, I'd like to know how was it, the general work on the script, where there was a lot of debate with Mikel on whether you saw any contradictions or in the characters, or how that worked. I did see, watching the film, contradictions on how they behave, the characters, but I thought everything was super coherent or consistent, because it reflects on how we people are. We can contradict ourselves, but then we take a path and we follow that path. I'm not too sure how that kind of work with Mikel was. And then also the question for Mikel, I don't know. I thought it was quite funny. Those two moments were almost Kubrick-like moments when Paul launches the cork, and all of a sudden we see the tile that breaks, and then we see that they throw the cork, and the cork fell into the pool, and time has gone by, and the house has been refurbished, and it's almost metaphoric, apart from that nod between, metaphorically, I mean, between both scenes. For example, the tile is breaking, the house is breaking, and the relationship between them is breaking up. And then when the cork falls into the water, it made me feel really good, because water, it seems everything is very stable. But no, there's still a lot to go, because that's very unstable. And you're talking about floating, which is very interesting also. Thank you. As regards the contradictions, how we confronted that clear contradiction that exists, there were a lot of conversations as regards to who these characters were. And basically it was to try to understand our contradictions. The issue, and as we mentioned before, the character of Ivan, one of the difficulties we had was that, of course, he doesn't want to be a landowner, but he ends up being a landowner because of political conditions. He comes from a fabric or a neighborhood cooperative fabric. He wants to change and go into an environment which is much more rural and wild. And in that, and he's got workers who he pays. He wants to be horizontal. He wants to try it. And we were saying this before. That's the difficulty. There are social structures which are very difficult, and working structures that are very difficult to turn around, because you've got land, you've got people who you're paying, and we try to live with the maximum complexity on the human side of that difficulty of trying to address those situations. We try to understand from us, talking between us, and that's the way we attacked these issues, or address these issues. I think the sphere of what is intimate, these are layers that subsequently we can draw from the film. From my point of view, the interesting thing is we propose them, and if they ring a bell, or if we want to sit down, or they resonate and we want to judge them, that belongs to the audience or the spectators. But the intimate conflict between this couple that's trying to project a vision of the future, an image of themselves in the future. But I'm sure what they don't do is to look at themselves in the present and say, are we okay, dude? Because that would be the issue, that's to say, to let go, which is very human. And we worked a lot from that idea. We said, why are they together? Well, because these two have got an energy, in our idea at least. We work it from the initial sequence in the dance. It's an indigenous, and they're strong, they're charismatic, but that energy could turn out to be very damaging and very violent between both of them, because conflict is a link, because it's not the healthiest of links, but it is a link or a nexus, and means that these don't break up that relationship. And what happens is what happens. Working with both of them was impressive, not only because they are great actors, but good-looking monsters of actors, but they are very hard workers as well, and they open themselves up completely to portray something which is complex, which is ambiguous. What is not is, who's Ivan, who's Elena? The film is going through that transit or transition. So I'm very, very thankful, and I love you both very much. And to answer your question that you asked about those two moments, Kubrick-like moments. These are big words you're saying there. I received them very happily, by the way, nevertheless, what you said about the reference to Kubrick. But there's an important part from all of the areas and departments of the film with Fran as well. We talked about the fact that it was a film that was aware that it was a film from the outset. That is, it's a film that has the idea of a proposal and playfulness from the moment, and then the music, and when they're looking at the screen. Those leaps in time, those ellipses, for me, have something to do that we're proposing for the spectator. We're going to propose a journey. This isn't reality. We're not making a remark or a comment. When you leave this experience, perhaps later, it might emerge. The discussion might emerge. Those two moments were very clear moments of saying, well, okay, we're playing here. Or it's a game. Or at least that's what we wanted to portray. Hi, good afternoon. Mikel, what surprised me, the film surprised me in the sense that it's very chameleon-like. All of a sudden a little inoffensive kitten turns up, and then she ends up being a tiger. Before Vicky's dance, there's another dance, which is that of the different point of views. How you make the spectator dance as well. Could you develop that a bit more, this aspect of the script? I'm glad you asked me this because it allows me to tell the story there. Yes, there was an idea of different arches, that is a different classic of the characters, and we worked this from the script with them, and it was tough in the editing room as well because we wanted the film to be rigorously 50% of both points of view. Those are the 2 points of view that should be common in a couple, and they diverge, and then they confront each other. One starts at a certain level, and it seems that it's something. Other things occur, and then it becomes something perhaps that we might think may occur, and she might think as well, and the opposite thing with Ivan. But what never happens is they are at the same point, which is also the experience of human situation and a relationship. It's very difficult to be in the place, look at our eyes and say, oh, we're going together, we're going together. But when they share the screen, which is the tennis game, obviously, which is the dinner, we can see the verbal confrontations appear. They have already been said, and they've not said it to each other ever for many years, and doing it with these two was a pleasure. I'm talking too much. No, that's okay, that's okay. If you don't talk now, now's the moment to talk. There was a question over here. Hi. Congratulations. Mabruk in Arab, I'd like to know, from my information, it's the first time that he was in front of a camera. How was it to direct him, or were there any difficulties? And for ILYASS, how did you live this experience? And the second question is, did you want migrant workers and Moroccans to participate from the outset of the script? And I'd like to know whether the film has any stereotypes against immigrants or not. Do we know whether there's a short distance from the peninsula to the Morocco, and there's a lot of ignorance in this level? Could we change this profile that some people have about migrant workers and so on? Thank you very much. I want to thank the trust and the support of the whole team, because from the outset I felt myself very welcomed. And I think it's a very important moment to talk about the film. It's a project that I received a lot of support, especially of MIKEL and Paul and Vicky. And for the first time to live this experience and to be here to tell the story a bit, I've had a great time. Vicky always said, you've got to have whatever happens, you've got to have a good time. And it has been a great support for me, and I want to thank them all very much, and also the production team, the opportunity I'll be given, and to put their trust in me And he didn't speak any French, and he speaks perfect Spanish and Catalan as well. So therefore, Elias is the idea of a character, a person who's never got in front of a camera, but the truth is playing a role, and he constructed the character. The process is different than with them because they're actors, they have a technique and so on, and experience. With Elias, what we did, well, we did a casting which was quite extensive, and when he appeared, sometimes that happens, it doesn't always happen, sometimes it happens that you've got the feeling that it's quite similar to like when you fall in love. It's very similar, you go, oh gee. And so there's always someone, and I'm sure much more relaxed than me, says, I know you're going to take him, but don't tell him. Go home, look at the video and so on, but it's true that he had something special, which is not only a way of being in front of a camera, it's a way of giving himself to the camera. So therefore we opened up a process which was almost 2 months, 2.5 months, or where we said Elias and I came, we met 2 or 3 times a week, and for a couple of hours we let Elias outside the door, and we entered into Karim, a boy who's just arrived, not like Elias, who doesn't speak Spanish or clear, not like Elias, who speaks French, not like Elias, and which had a memory and a journey, and that he was going to interact in sequences of the film. We talked about them, but we never rehearsed them, because with non-professional actors, we don't ever rehearse. We know what they were going to do, and there was an idea of being able to get into a situation and play with it. That's the capacity we've got when children's, for example, on the playground, to play to being something else, and then the bell rings and we go back and be ourselves. That's what he has, and he knows how to use it, and he can use it. So therefore, it was marvelous in that sense. And I want to love you I love you very much, and I thank you very much. And as regards what you were saying about the why Moroccan workers in the film, when I worked in the cork fields that summer in 2010, the cosmogony that I found in the forest was a mixture of people who spoke Catalan, who had been born and were deep rooted in that town, people who had come from Extremadura and Andalusia, and people who had come from Morocco, which is the cork harvesting community in Andalusia and Extremadura and in Girona. There are also cork groves, so therefore they're always going to be in the film, because the world that I lived through was at that moment. I didn't live in the tensions that existed in the film, because the film is fiction. It seems to me plausible that that tension can arise because we live in a society which is racist, not in the world of the cork, but in the world we live in a racist society. And to know this and tell it and allow us to analyze and question it, that interests me, in order to think that perhaps we can slowly but surely start to do things better. So therefore, the place they were going to have in the film was exactly the same as with the rest of the workers, in the sense that we were looking for people, incredible people, who had the capacity of saying, I've never lived this, but I'm going to try to portray it as generously as possible. And also from the idea that you're not portraying yourself, but you're portraying a character, that all of the people knew what they were going to do. They knew it was going to be a situation which was quite tense. But when we said cut, the shoot was very happy. On set, perhaps people will say, no, it was horrible. But for me, the shooting of the film, you saw the concentration, the focus, the pressure of time as well, but we had the feeling that we were doing something with a lot of love between us all. And they were there undoubtedly as well. It's a pity they can't all be here, but when a subsequent premiere in commercial theaters, we all feel like coming together, and we all feel like incredibly coming together again. Hi. For the TikTok account for the festival, I'd like to ask you, after being in such in contact with cork, and with the cork groves, do you still like the trees, or you're more a eucalyptus fans? I've got a cork keyring, and I keep it, and I've got it since the shoot. And obviously it's going to be a special image for me forever, I think forever. What did he say? But every time I open a bottle of wine, I'll remind, because of the cork on a bottle of wine, it'll always remind me of you. Yes. And people say, those trees, which are almost red, I never looked at them. Now I see them all over the place. But it is true. Making films is beautiful, is great. But one of them is this: so you like something, I liked it, for example, and I felt like for it to form part of films, albeit it's fiction, which is what I like. But all of a sudden, it does. This practice does exist. This material does exist. It stems from the trees that people work a lot to peel that cork off of it, and ends up in our wine bottles. And I've got a cork wallet, for example. Two things. The first of these is that there's a song, a Basque song, that it says, I'll have the house of my father. I'd like to know whether it's only I saw that or whether you saw that. What happens to the poor donkey? Thank you. What language? I will defend the house of my father. So therefore, I suppose, being from here, a Basque speaker from the Basque country, it's something that I've got in my, I don't know. Well, cultural DNA, I would say, for example, it's a verse which is quite significant, but I believe that in the film, it doesn't necessarily have the same meaning that it had in Aresti's verse that you've mentioned because of historic references, because when he wrote it, Aresti was from Bilbao. He also spoke to the working substrate. And in our case, we've got that idea of what is the house for these two. Is it a project? Is it their relationship? They have a house at the end of the film. They have it, but we were talking with Vicky and Paul that perhaps they gain a house, but they've lost all of the idea of it being a home. And also tell you that defending the house in the Empordà, and when I saw it in that region, I thought it's incredible, but it also explains what the film's about, is that when a person that doesn't belong to a context such as me, you fit into that context, what draws your attention is what's very natural for those other people. My partner back then, I called them because there were fires in those areas in 2012. I said, the fire's very close. They said, yeah, it's in the town nearby. And what are you going to do if it comes home? I said, oh, well, we'll defend it with water and use hoses to put out the fire. And I said, this is incredible. But for them, it's a natural gesture because it's an element that they have to fight against summer after summer. And perhaps quite sure it'd be interesting we address why this happens every summer. But that's something completely different. I'm not sure if that answered your question about the donkey. Well, okay, the donkey, from the personal to how the film finishes. I grew up in Igeldo, which is a mountain here in San Sebastian, and there was a donkey when I used to jump on and he looked at me when I went to jump on the bus, and it's I'm very endeared with the donkeys, and then we've got Bresson's film, Baltasar, where the donkey is the protagonist and has an innocent look. I wouldn't say innocent, I would say the look, the non-human look, without judgment. The donkey, at least in the film, occupies the place. If you've got the donkey, at least they've got something of that, of being able to be there. And Vicky's character generates a link of accompanying each other. Enrique says at the beginning of the film, buy another one, because the donkeys feel very lonely. And a bit of that, when she loses the donkey, Elena's character, they both lose something. They both lose the possibility of having that look of nature without judging it. Nature is neither romantic nor violent. nature, we throw in those different categories. You want to talk about the donkey? No. Hi. I'd like to ask Mikel about the gender roles. How you've worked upon the gender roles, because apparently there's a conflict. The fact that Vicky's character is much more active and decided she takes initiative. Paul seems more insecure. Then the attitude of Vicky's causes certain insecurity. I'm not too sure what was the intention behind that, whether you talked about that. Yes. Yes. It is true also that the characters were as such because I thought they were attractive as such, the characters. That is to say, once again, I've got the feeling that when we say a woman is strong and a man is vulnerable, we're saying this as it being exceptional, and that's great because it's interesting that we talk about this, I believe, but the reality is I wish those categories, there will come a time where we're cross-sectional in that sense, that we can portray and be all of this indistinctly. So, but we did talk about this because obviously the setting of the film is formally, canonically speaking, masculine, very masculine. We can't deny this, but it's not a factor of an attitude that we had of generating a discourse vis-a-vis this issue. It's interesting because when you address the story of a couple, man, woman, heterosexuals, where they go to the field and they create their life, all of these layers disappear. Denying this would be to sort of try to cutting it out of the film. We wanted this to happen from the script, that you generate these dynamics and they happen because they're interesting. It's all about the conflict of what the film's about, the tension of who I am, what I want to be, and what I'm doing at the time. Yes, I think so. I don't remember. During the rehearsal, we talked about this, what you said. What we didn't talk about this, but we did talk about, it was quite clear what was the conflict from where we came from. And in this case, there's a character, whether it's a man or a woman, it's all the same, that's coming to a place which is their moment. The house is of Elena. She inherits it, the house. But I think that and believe that we've always felt the feeling of wanting to belong, which is something that mankind or humanity and people, we want the desire of being loved and to belong to a community, belonging to something. And what generates these tensions that exist is that Elena belongs and she is already, and when they call her boss and when they call her maestresa and he doesn't have a place. So in the couple, that generates a tension so that he can occupy the same place from my character. I want him to feel good. Well, I want him to feel that he forms part of all of this the same as myself. And I think these tensions arise, and in the rehearsals, that's how we address them, not going to more specific things, which at the end of the day is universal. Congratulations, everyone. Perhaps I lost something in the previous remark, but this project, was this thought of before the pandemic, but it was filmed during the pandemic? I'd like to know whether any weather or health conditions brought about changes in the script or in the shooting of the film. Well, this could be the director or the producers as well. Thank you. You respond the script and I respond the shoot. Yes, it is true that the film was developed pre-pandemic, and the fact we had to shoot it in 2020. And we had to delay it 1 year. And just a parenthesis on the side, so that, and I'll go back to what you were saying. You've all seen the film, so therefore you know that Mikel is much more than just a very promising director. He's a director. For me, he's been an experienced director from the day one, and he's a person who's not afraid. He has no fear of dealing of gender roles and racism issues, which are universal and we don't talk enough about, which I thought this was very attractive and extraordinary. He pushes a lot and he works more than anyone, so therefore it makes you want to follow him along the journey. And he pushes the limits positively, that is to say, he's a person that the things that can't be done or they're not possible to do them, he tries to make them reality. And that's very motivating. And for me as a producer, apart from the fact that he's cinema and he himself, who's a friend of mine now, makes me want to be a better person and a better producer every day. Having said this, when the pandemic came along and we had to delay the project for a year, and we were very activated, I think MIKEL was the first person that showed this, that he had the capacity of stopping and return to the film after so much time. 1 year is a long time, because as it was seasonal, we had to shoot it in summer, so therefore you can't do it from August to October, so that you've got a year ahead of you. So therefore, he turned that into a virtue. That's to say, I want to take advantage of revisiting the film, the script, his work, how he was going to shoot it, how he was going to rehearse it, continue to do castings. We continued to with the process, and I could say that it even favored us. It gave us more time. And that's what we've done with the film in general. There were very few economic resources, and to turn it into a virtue, put more of ourselves, do things differently perhaps. And after the pandemic, we were very prepared to shoot the film, and that can be shown. That's noticeable in the film, because now we shoot everything and prepare everything very quickly. But we've got to go back to those dynamics of doing things and get to the shoot and much more prepared. And as regards to the conditions of where we shot, the truth is what the characters were going through, the fire, and that feeling that a fire affects not only your house, but the world, the environment that surrounds you. We lived through that, for example, apart from the fact we were in the fifth wave. We leaped into a year, but we shot through the fifth wave of the pandemic with masks in August, but with the feeling that the fire attacks you at all time, and that's something, and that's what was transmitted, I think, and portrayed on the screen. The script, the pandemic, correct me, Fran, but I don't think it didn't modify anything at all. Perhaps what it gave it was much more time. There's a lot of writing, but the script is one of these, but the work we do with these two is different, and the nature of this project, which mixed these two with non-actors, at the end of the day, they had an enormous responsibility, because the simile is like a jazz band, for example, that plays and improvises and does free jazz, but then they've got two soloists who know the score, and they've got to make it land into a script that was very well written and very solid, which knows that it's directed in a certain way. It's going to a specific place, or taking you to a specific place, and they were generous enough to be there, and the responsibility of redirecting it. So therefore, from there, the pandemic allowed us to work on that elasticity of being within that muscle much more time, because more time is what we always want. We want more time. Hi, good morning. I would like to highlight, but MIKEL has already talked about this quite a lot, but let's go back to what you said about this marvelous profession, because there are professions that cinema should also make evident in these times of technology, multiverses, which is the issue of the Suro cork, that beauty that you've managed to achieve, because it's an ensemble piece. In the images, it's beautiful how you've reflected the peeling of the cork, as we say in Empordà, and also the sound. Marvelous sound has been, because to capture that moment of peeling the cork, and it sounds of the sound you truly hear when you're very next to a tree. It's great work. My question is, I want to ask Vicky and Paul, how they got involved into this art, this profession. And the moment when Vicky picks up the axe, and she had to do that, the peelers have come along, and someone wants to hire me for next year, but I'm very poor at peeling cork. It was very interesting talking to them, and entering into their world was quite enriching. And there's something of the character, or what he does. is what I did a little bit. He entered into the forest to go away from other things. The relationship perhaps is not working, and he runs away from the forest to try to form part of another group, Los Levairas, for example, to form part of them to a certain extent. And it's like I try to understand them and get along with them, and the forest almost gets involved. It's esoteric, and I think it's well shown from a narrative standpoint and aesthetically, because the forest enters into Ivan. All of us, I think, we spent 24 hours a day in a very wild area in Ampurdá with how hot it was. The forest is true, that is to say, the forest comes into him because he's running away. The forest is a place of evading himself, of evasion, and also a refuge. He's trying to find his place. He finds in that harmony, in that atmosphere, with these men who are very rude men and raw men, he finds something intimate and sincere, of feeling comfortable. He finds a communion there. And this is something that happened minimally at a lower level, but intimately, I understood quite clearly that idea. And it's only given to you the feeling that we all have, and everyone finds it in their day-to-day and interior, where that's when you are really in communion with nature. That is to say, that type of silence that we all know, that intimacy, that thing that makes... It triggers a more mysterious question that you have upon existence and so on and so forth. We all know this, and that place is when the character finds himself in the forest, and there's a scene it's been edited, and I'm very angry. Might sound angry, but I'm not. I think it was marvelous, but I thought about it the other day. I was thinking about it. Of course, the script is so good. I'm sorry, I'm sucking up to you, but no, the script is so good. There are things you don't have to tell. So if there's something that Ampadja, the character, said very calmly, said very sincerely, and being very small, said, I like the forest. Something that was, because it was something intimate that he had found, and he never would have thought that, but he found something which was intimate with transferable that I think we all know. And he does say it. That's right, you do say it. Oh, I've got to see the film again. I thought you'd edited it out. No, he does say it. And so Elena's character has that point of, you say this, but there's a point of a bit of tenderness. Yes, the forest, as Vicky, it generates certain things, and like Paul says, of calmness and so on and so forth. But Elena, there's something in the forest which is her childhood environment as a character, but then it starts to generate a threat, because he goes there, the character feels lonely, and because he's there and very poorly attended, but I worked upon the fact that it's a place where initially I was comfortable, but then it was a place, symbolically speaking, which swallowed him in. It's a place that his character goes so far that the character stops being here. He goes farther away. I thought it was interesting to generate that tension towards the space itself. There's something that you talked about, contradictions. How do we address complex issues? There are a lot of verbs, or active verbs, or can be interpreted and used. And you said, it made me think that he was being swallowed, and Ivan used to bury a lot of things, which has a lot to do with the rural world, I think forest world or nature world or animal. But yes, but we worked up, let's make sure that these characters are not in our heads, but they should in our innards, inside us, because they're related quite curiously, like MIKEL says, that the conflict is a link and a way of linking to each other. And Paul and I wanted to generate a type of an animal connection that had to do with the forest, which had to do with the donkey, that has to do with nature, that justifies that link. Because otherwise there are too many contradictions in this couple. So how do we justify this? And that sometimes happens. You only understand it because the physical side of things still happen, and then there's still physical struggle. There's very corporeal in this film. There are a lot of readings. You're talking about the cork, how beautiful it is, and so forth. In that sense, I think MIKEL does something which is very difficult in cinema and any artistic expression, is that to choose an element and that the senses and the different readings of them are like rivers and can open them up, and that's what cork has, the physical side of things, that they're still fighting in their relationship, and they're fighting physically, each one isolated but with the land, because the struggle, more intellectual struggle and reasoning, knows if they address it, because it's almost, from that intellectual standpoint, it's almost dead. And what you're saying about sound is perhaps the most autobiographical side of the film. For me, I remember I was in the forest. When you don't know, it's just like when you don't know the sea, you're in the forest, but you have no references. The feeling of being lost and being found mixes, and those days that these cork peelers have, from 6 a.m. when it's the night until 2 p.m. when it's very, very hot in the month of August or July, there was something that the sound turned it into a lot of possibilities of imagination. And what I lived through at that time, that's the most cinematographic thing you can find. I said to work upon that, we did prior work, prior to the shooting, where Leo Dogan, who did the sound live, he started to record sounds, which are things that we couldn't have put in when we shot the film, but he did all this, shot the film. Then Shanti Salvador, in the sound design, we worked upon the idea of multiplying different sections of sound which are outside but are also very inside, in Ivan and in Elena, with the wind, those ideas. And there's also a moment in which there is an absence of sound precisely to generate exactly that. That whether you get in tune with or not, because you're not really clearly placed, because these characters are not very well placed. We've got a question for one final question. Hi, congratulations for this opera prima. We know how difficult it is to make a feature film in Spain. I'd like to ask you, as regards this, whether you believe, with all of these labs, production funds, the average of opera prima directors is about 40 years of age, from a study that I've seen. I'd like to know, what's this due to? Would they producers, or I would also ask you, Laura, what you look for a producer when you're going to produce an opera prima, a first feature film, and then the actors ask them how they decided to get involved into this first feature film of this director. Thank you. In my case, I think the first thing there was Ikusmira Berriak, which is the laboratory, Ikusmira Berriak, the residence of this festival, with other cultural entities, the city like Tabacalera and so on, that they give you a space and time. The best idea of mentors who are external people come along to listen to where you want to go, and they are generous enough to direct you and propose, but from a respectful point of view, not from you and not them. This happened in Ikusmira Berriak, and I shared with Quiero Russo, who's a Bolivian director who we know very well here. So therefore, to be able to have that contact meant that those 6 weeks were very fruitful, and we knew when we left Ikusmira Berriak what project we were going to make up, and the project would have a location on the map. When I met Laura, or when I worked throughout the world with this project, we were saying, no, the origin is there. It's linked to the festival of San Sebastian. And that it's true that it opens up a lot of doors. So therefore, we have that, which is a certain letter of presentation, but we've got the time, the resources that we destined. Paul came along to improvise, and you can tell this, Paul, if you want, improvisations that have ended up being, some of them, even sequences that are in the film. So in the end of the day, I'm not too sure, I don't dare reflect upon first directors, feature film directors, and the age range. But time is a key, as Laura said. And XABIER gave us time to take that first step, time and a structure. That's what we need, and that's why I think all directors need. And just an anecdote, because I have to tell it, when we were doing the improvisations with tracksuits in Tabacalera, we did some improvisations, and I acted the Cole. I portrayed the Cole. The role, I was in the camera, but I was portraying her role, the character that she portrays. But Paul, she didn't have a shotgun. I don't know whether it was what you were doing. He had a gesture. When that sequence was shot, because it survived throughout the whole writing of the script, we did a take, and I said, Paul, I said, no, you saw me doing it. And I said, this is great. This is excellent. That's the best idea in life. And I said, you did that in the improvisation. The worst thing you can tell an actor. 5 years later, tell an actor what he's already did in some exercises, improvising years back. But that's a symptom of how we've made the film, I think. What we producers look for a first feature film, and I'm going to give the floor to my colleagues, but personally, I think that talent, and MIKEL is quite clear. He had a lot of talent, and he has a lot of talent. And then a company, someone. I think we've got who thinks about things over and over, because it's very difficult to make films in Spain, in Catalonia. And at that time, it was also difficult to do in Catalonia when we set up the film. But I think that we have to turn things around in that sense, and the first feature film is an opportunity of starting to accompany someone on a journey that will be a long journey in this case. But for me, that's what it is, yes. Well, to complement this, I personally, we've seen a lot of first feature films is less than 40 years of age. I think it's 30. I'm not 40 years old. I want to make this clear. And you're one of the older ones that we've worked with. But it is true that a film, at the end of the day, we're working with a significant amount of money, and quite often, not always, but a first feature film, unfortunately, and quite fortunately at the same time, with public money. So therefore, we've got to be very careful. And before the works have to be very carefully taken care of, and it requires a long time. Lost like Isabel, through workshops, working on the script, and then financing. And 4 or 5 years go by. It's very difficult to make a film. 30-odd, well, okay, it's complicated that this doesn't happen. But I personally, the short film world, shorts, I like them for new directors to have prior work in short films, which gives you confidence and trust, as well as the investors from TV, or TV investors. And I think a first feature film is well approached in our country, and the challenge now, not now, but for many years, is the second and third feature film. That's the biggest problem that we've got in this country, and of supporting the directors in the second and third film, because it's the boom of the first feature film, and then we leave them to one side, and it's my fault as well. We leave them to one side and disregard them because they're less interesting to discover things. It's much more difficult. And I think that's a challenge of the Spanish film industry, to support these types of projects. Xavier, do you want to add anything? Yes, well, relationship with Mikel we already had in the past. We did a short last year, which worked very well, which is a possibly seed for another project. And when we knew that he was doing Suro, instead of entering into the typical situation with producers, who was going to finance it first and who activates it first, we talked about the fact that the important thing is that he does something. It wasn't so much that Mikel did this project. Mikel had to make a film. That was quite clear. And I think we're seeing why. He's prepared, and he's at a point of narrative maturity and so on, so that it had to be made. And in this case, we did his, and then we'll do ours, and then we can do a second one for a novel director. Okay. Thank you very much to all of you. Let's say farewell to the team with a round of applause. Thank you.